morning team, happy Monday and happy new year. Mr. McCarthy here with a new Leadership Insight series. And it's certainly one of the most influential, most impactful subjects that I've ever had the opportunity to get some training and education on. It's certainly one of the most important topics that we've ever discussed. And hopefully you'll find it really interesting as well. I think it's a subject that will probably have a larger series of videos. You know, sometimes our series are like 4 videos. This might be 6 or more, because I think it's also a subject that really deserves us going into a little more depth on, okay? It's on the subject of unconscious bias. So let me start by showing you a couple of photographs. And I want you to maybe even write down the very first adjectives or impressions that come to your minds when you see these people. Okay, so young man at the top, maybe he's a guitarist, maybe he's an artist, maybe, you know, he works in a warehouse. Young lady at the bottom, maybe she's a singer, maybe she's a nurse, maybe she's a teacher. Write down what you think. What are the first ideas that come to your mind when you see these people? So in fact, you may be surprised to know that the young man in the first picture is Babak Ferdowsi. I think I pronounced his name properly. He's actually an MIT graduate. He is a systems engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. And he's actually now the flight director of NASA's Mars Science Lab Curiosity mission. He's actually one of the most accomplished, most successful rocket scientists in the world. And the young lady at the bottom picture, I'll probably pronounce her name badly too. Her name is Ori Okolo. She is a Kenyan activist, lives in Africa. She's a graduate of Harvard Law. And in 2014, she was actually voted by Times Magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. A leading global technology expert, and she was Google's former policy manager in Africa. An amazing young lady, and be very, very famous. So again, maybe not the first impression that you had about those two individuals. And I do that just to kind of illustrate the subject. Okay, so maybe you but your basis was biased on judgments and information that hits you quickly when you see these photographs. Let's say you've got you're opening a new school, you're looking for a program director, you're looking for a head instructor, you're looking to fill those positions, and you've got Mary and you've got Pete, and Mary's a 30-something mom with kids, and she's super energetic. Maybe your first impression is, well, she's definitely best to be the program director. And Pete's in his late 20s, and he's athletic, and he's a great martial artist, and he's a great teacher, so maybe he's definitely going to be a head instructor. Well, you've used unconscious bias in making those decisions, right? In reality, our attitudes and our behavior towards other people are very influenced as much by our instinctive feelings as by our rational thought process. And that hidden drive affects everything from what we choose to eat for dinner, who you choose to run the next leadership team. Our brains are hardwired to make these unconscious decisions very quickly, because the number of choices that we face every day would be overwhelming if we had to kind of consciously evaluate every single one. So this means that there's a real direct link between our unconscious thinking and our actions and behaviors. And when it comes to making choices about people at work, in our lives, it's really important that those decisions are not based on bias, right? Maybe Mary is the best person to be the program director, and maybe Pete is the best person to be our head instructor, but let's not base that on information that we don't have, or on biases that we do have. So in this Leadership Insight, we're going to explore this subject. Why do we make unconscious decisions, and you know how sometimes they are biased, and what can we do to avoid that. So just for a few more minutes in this first video, let's talk about why do we have unconscious biases. So research suggests that, as I said, we instinctively sort of categorize people and things using easily observed criteria like age and weight, skin color and gender and so on. But we also classify people using, you know, other information that we glean: educational level, disability, sexuality, accent. So here's a personal example. You may think that my accent makes me sound smart and interesting, right? The British guy. In fact, where I am originally from in the UK, which is Wales, my accent is actually considered quite the opposite. It's stereotyped as belonging to lower class, uneducated hicks. So the point of that is, we don't all have the same unconscious biases, right? They depend on where we come from. And I don't mean that geographically, I mean that more sort of emotionally and spiritually. So the advantage of this human system that we have is that it saves us time and effort processing information about people, allowing us to spend more time, more of our mental resources on other things. So it's actually a very natural genetic part of how humans operate, right? To have these unconscious biases. So let's make it clear, an unconscious bias isn't a bad thing. It's just a thing. It's what you do with that unconscious bias, right? That's a bad thing. And remember, these are unconscious biases. These are not biases. These are not bigotries. This is not racism. This is not sexism. These are not choices that we're making. They're unconscious biases. It's really important that we understand that. And over the last 3 decades in particular, the understanding of unconscious bias has really evolved. There's an enormous amount of research that's going on into it. And I'm going to share some of that with you. One of the leading institutions in this field is actually the University of California, San Francisco. They've got a lot of resource online. You should check it out. But here's some of the things that they publish and what we know. Unconscious biases actually develop at a really early age. Biases emerge during kind of middle childhood and appear to develop across childhood. So we actually have our unconscious biases before we become adults. Unconscious biases, you know, they have real world effects on behavior. They're also malleable, right? So we can change them. You know, we can take steps to minimize the impact of unconscious biases. We know that through research. And like I said, a lot of research has been done. You know, we know, for example, from research that they wrote fictitious resumes for people with white sounding names, and they sent them to people who were looking to employ people. And the resumes with white sounding names received 50% more callbacks than the fictitious resumes with African American sounding names. Big study was done. 50% more callbacks for the resumes with white sounding names. So there's a lot of examples like that I'll kind of share with you as we go through this. And, you know, just to kind of close today, we're going to be talking about the impact of unconscious bias on discrimination, the benefits of the opposite, the benefits of having real diversity in your team are unimaginable, unmeasurable, very important, and I think it's something that we really need to think about. We're going to look at how do we recognize our own unconscious biases when they're unconscious, and there's a really great resource from Harvard that is called the Implicit Association Test. There's actually a bunch of them that you can take. They're really fascinating. So recognizing our own biases, how do we focus on people? How do we increase exposure to biases, right? So that we can really understand and minimize that. So that's what this is all going to be about. I hope you're going to find it really interesting, and as always, it's going to be really practical. So I look forward to the rest of the series. As always, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. If you like the video, give it a like and share it with anybody. And any questions you might have, I look forward to taking them. Thanks.